It's a pleasure for us to have here Bridget Haas. She presenting for us at EDS seminar for ESO and EarthLab. And Bridget is a data scientist at NEON and splits her time between the Airborne Observation Platform, AOP, and data skills teams. She enjoys working in a variety of capacities at NEON, mainly centered around remote sensing data. Some of her goals include generating AOP data products, maintaining and developing the processing of QA/QC pipeline, improving data management practices, conducting calibration and validation fieldwork, and creating training research for working with NEON AOP and NEON data. Prior to working in airborne research at NEON, she received her master's degree from Oregon State University, specializing in marine geophysics, and worked at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, supporting marine geophysical expeditions. So thank you so much, Bridget, for coming, and yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Sabelli. Yeah. All right. Yeah, super happy to be here and see some familiar faces and some new faces. The talk today that I'm giving is about scaling remote sensing data, focusing on the National Ecological Observatory Network remote sensing data. And I'm calling it, I borrowed this from another colleague who gave a talk recently called Plot to Plane. So this is Plot to Plane to Planet. So this is what we'll cover today. I'll keep it fairly high level, but I'll give an overview of NEON and the Airborne Observation Platform, which is the team I worked on at NEON, and then discuss scaling up from ground to satellite data, focusing on that NEON data along with satellite data sets, and then explore some trade-offs of different scales and resolutions in data and how that can affect your analysis. And then hopefully if there's time at the end, I can give a couple data demos looking at AOP data, as well as some EMIT data over the Niwot Ridge site, just up here in the mountains, and then also show AOP data in Google Earth Engine. Okay, so just before we kind of dive into it, I wanted to define what I mean by scaling. And I actually looked at the dictionary definitions of scaling, and I found things like fish scales and weighing scaling and then scaling a mountain, but there wasn't really any definition of remote sensing scaling. And so it's kind of a niche understanding that probably a lot of you are familiar with, but I just wanted to break it down high level. So scaling basically involves methods that translate processes and mechanisms from a spatial, temporal, or spectral resolution to another. And so these three kind of subcategories of scales, the spatial, temporal, and spectral, are really kind of what we focus more on in remote sensing. So spatial can mean, are we looking at local, regional, or global scale? And satellites really enable that global scale. Temporal can mean like what time frame are we looking at? Are we looking at days, years, decades, or even up to geological timescales? And of course, remote sensing data hasn't been around that long, so kind of the longest we can look at is decadal or kind of century timescales at this point. And then lastly, with hyperspectral or multispectral data, we can look at the spectral resolution of things. So are we looking at a red, green, blue image with just 3 bands, a multispectral image, something like Landsat, or hyperspectral image, which is what NEON provides, as well as some other up and coming satellite missions that I'll talk about. So scaling down or up basically just means making inferences or approximations about what's happening on the ground using data collected at a coarser scale. And this is really just the essence of remote sensing. So I feel like those two can't really be decoupled. So this is just an image kind of breaking down some of the different sensors that we can use for measuring things at different scales. So AOP actually has down to the leaf level measurements of a lot of our data, and this is called a leaf clip attachment that we actually use in our handheld spectrometer to get the spectral signature of individual leaves. More and more, we're seeing drone-based remote sensing that can measure things at a sub-tree or tree level, like less than 1 meter resolution. AOP collects data at this 1 meter resolution, which can capture individual trees in most cases. And then lastly, satellites can capture these larger areas, but at much higher or coarser resolution. So that's on the order of 10 to around 100 meter pixel size or resolution. So that's kind of what I'll be highlighting in this talk, or some different ways of doing this. And then this is just a schematic that from the early days of NEON that was kind of breaking down the design of NEON, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but NEON was really designed for this scaling applications. So why do we care about remote sensing scaling? Basically, in a nutshell, it gives us this bigger picture understanding of what we're looking at. And you can collect a lot of information with satellite remote sensing data, but this isn't really the truth. It's kind of a proxy for what we're trying to understand on Earth. And so tying in the ground based data is really important to understand what's going on. But it's really expensive and time consuming to collect that ground data. And so that's why we need these methods to scale up. We also have more uncertainty with what error propagates. So with data collected from satellites, there's a lot more uncertainty. And so we can try to narrow that down by bringing in ground data. Okay, so with that, I'll kind of just get into a brief overview of NEON. I think a lot of you here have probably heard about it, but in case not, I'll describe it a bit. So NEON was designed to be a continental scale ecological observatory. We have measurements everywhere from ground, very small based, or very small in size samples, such as these soil monitors. We have these observational plots at about 40 meter by 40 meter scales where we collect data, observational data, as well as instrumented data. We have towers with a tower airshed capturing instrumented measurements like eddy covariance and flux measurements. And then lastly, we have the airborne observation platform that's collecting these regional scale areas. And we have 81 field sites across the US, including Alaska, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii. 47 of these are terrestrial sites and 34 are aquatic. And then we produce over 180 data products at all of these sites. So I talked about this a little bit, but we have three main collection methods: the instrumented systems. So these are sensors that capture things like meteorology, soil, surface water, and eddy covariance or energy fluxes. These are the towers, the soil sensors, and we have a lot of aquatic sensors as well. We have the observational system, or OS. We like to use acronyms. These are basically boots on the ground, like people collecting measurements like stem diameters to get at things like biomass, as well as chemistry measurements. So we're capturing the nutrient content of leaves and vegetation. We have microbial sequencing and pathogens. And then lastly, we have the remote sensing team. And this is deployed to different sites throughout every summer season. And we're collecting, I'll get into this in a little bit, but we're collecting three main sensors that generate a number of data products. So these are the discrete and waveform LiDAR system. This is a digital elevation model generated from that. And then a hyperspectral sensor that's kind of illustrated in the bottom right here. So that's our 426 band optical sensor. And then lastly, we have a really high resolution red, green, blue camera, and that's actually at less than 10 centimeter resolution. So our waveform, or sorry, our LiDAR and hyperspectral are collected at about 1 meter resolution on the ground. And then most of our sites are around 100 kilometers squared, so 10 by 10 kilometers. Some of our aquatic sites are a little bit smaller, so that's capturing that kind of regional scale data. So AOP was really designed to be this bridge between ground-based measurements that are collected at NEON and satellite data. And so you can see here in the middle, this is a canopy height model of one of our sites, and you can get much finer resolution than this satellite data of the same area. So I'll just go into some of our data products that might be of interest to you to pair with satellite data. With our LiDAR data, we generate 3D point clouds and models from those point clouds. And so this image shows basically these are little individual XYZ locations of our LiDAR points, and we colorize them with our camera data to get kind of a more realistic model of what we're seeing And then on the left is the same data, but colored by elevation. So you can kind of do different things from these raw point cloud data. And then I mentioned this briefly, but we generate raster data sets or models from the point cloud data. So these are a digital surface model, which includes the ground as well as vegetation on top of the ground. That's like a 3D construction of everything the plane sees. The digital terrain model is with the trees stripped away, so you can look at the actual elevation on the earth. And then lastly, we can difference these two. The algorithm is a little bit more involved in that, but to generate a canopy height model. And this is really a kind of unique product that can be paired with satellite data to generate larger scale models. I'll show something like that at the end. And then our second kind of main instrument is our hyperspectral sensor. This is an Avaris NG sensor built by JPL. And we operate 3 of these, and they collect spectral information about what you're flying over. And so I borrowed this from one of the Earth Lab tutorials, actually, but this is just an example of the spectra you might see from healthy vegetation compared to burned vegetation. And then on the top, this is one of our data sets from a project over some wildfires in the Pacific Northwest. This is a false color image. So instead of red, green, blue, we use something like an infrared band and then green and blue. And it really highlights the burned area compared to the live vegetation. And then this is a kind of wordy, so don't worry too much about it, but I just wanted to highlight that we generate a lot of different hyperspectral data products from the at-sensor radiance. That's kind of the most raw form. It doesn't have any atmospheric correction. And then we apply an atmospheric correction to create this directional reflectance. We are now producing as well a bidirectional reflectance data product, which has a BRDF correction applied. Those of you are familiar. And then we create a bunch of derived indices, and we follow this level 1, 2, 3 kind of that matches NASA levels. So the derived indices are things like the canopy water content. These are like moisture stress index. We have vegetation indices like normalized difference vegetation index. Probably a lot of you have seen that. And then other things like albedo, LAI, and FPAR. Level 2 are just provided by Flightline, and then level 3 are tiled and mosaicked into 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer tiles. Okay, so how does this tie into some of these recent satellite and upcoming satellite missions? So NEON, EMIT, and SBG are kind of really well aligned in the sense that they all are producing or intended to produce similar data sets, but just at different scales. So I'll just give a little high level overview of each of these. I already talked about NEON. So this is a 30-year project funded by National Science Foundation. We started collecting data in 2013, but officially started collecting closer to, I think, 2018. And so from 2018, there's planned to be 30 years of data. This is at 1 meter resolution, and we fly sites about we fly 3 out of every 5 sites. 3 out of 5 sites three sites every 5 years. So it's a little bit less than annual sampling here. EMIT is a recent International Space Station sensor that was started collecting data in 2022. And I think it's on a renewal cycle, but it's planned to be collecting until around 2030 if all goes well. And this was really intended, I'll break it down in a little bit, but to collect information about mineral dust. But it's the same sensor essentially as this hyperspectral sensor, so you can use it for many different applications, including ecological research like we do at NEON. And then lastly, the surface biology and geology satellite is intended to launch near the end of the decade, so 2028 or around there. And that's intended to be like a globally circulating satellite that will collect comparable data, but at larger areas. And that will, again, be a really complementary data set to what we're collecting here. Okay, so as I mentioned, EMIT was more designed towards mineral dust investigations. And the main question is, to answer what is the current and future role of mineral dust in atmospheric forcing. But you can see they produce these same or similar data sets to what we're producing. So the at-sensor radiance, surface reflectance, and then some of the higher level ones might not be as related to ecology, but you could create your own higher level data products to match what you're trying to understand. And then this is just an example of one of the EMIT applications. So using it to understand spectral diversity and vegetation function and structure. And then the SBG satellite, this is just breaking down some of the parameters that are planned for this. But again, it's one of the main applications of this is terrestrial vegetation application. So it really will tie in well to the NEON data sets. Okay, so next I just wanted to go into some of the trade-offs and kind of show you what these data comparison looks like between the AOP and these satellite data sets. So the chart in the upper right corner is basically just highlighting some of the different temporal scales on the y-axis versus spatial scales and some of the different sensors that are already in orbit. And then I just put the three sensors that I'm highlighting here for reference. So you can get more site-based, that's what the aircraft are mainly designed. Regional analysis, kind of in this middle circle here. And then lastly, the landscape analysis or kind of more continental global scale. And so AOP kind of fits in here. We collect almost every year or every few years, every couple of years. And then SBG and EMIT are kind of at this coarser spatial scale, but more frequent temporal scale. And then this chart at the bottom is basically just breaking down kind of some of the trade-offs in resolution, both spectral, spatial, and temporal for each of these data sets. So NEON, EMIT, and SBG are all in this hyperspectral land. More kind of older satellites like Landsat or Sentinel are more in the multispectral. So we're really improving there. NEON has the highest spatial resolution, but then the temporal resolution is a lot coarser, as well as the area covered. So you can see how you could tie in these data sets to create a more complete picture. Okay, so lastly, I just wanted to highlight some examples of our data, and this is all available in a Jupyter notebook if anyone's interested in exploring. So there's it's called Vitals NASA notebook that's designed for working with EMIT and eco-stress data. And basically we've just modified that to allow you to look at NEON data along with EMIT data. And so this is our Niwot Ridge site. So we're somewhere down here. This is the Mountain Research Station area of CU. And this is the flight box that we cover, this little yellow box here. And then this is an example of an EMIT data set over that same area. And so the notebook, if anyone's interested, basically shows you how to find those concurrent data sets at AOP sites. Taking a look at resolution, I think this is a little coarser than it actually looks, but this is the EMIT data cropped to that NEON flight box, and then scaling in or zooming in on, this is actually the Mountain Research Station, if anyone's been there. You get this really high resolution data with the NEON AOP. This is just to showcase the difference between hyperspectral and multispectral resolution here. So with the AOP data, this is at a single vegetated pixel. This is in Google Earth Engine, so I can demo this as well. But you get this really nice vegetation spectra here, whereas with Landsat or some older multispectral data sets, you get a lot coarser resolution. Again, the area covered is much smaller though than what Landsat covers. And then lastly, this is kind of where AOP data is really nicely designed to be paired with satellite data. So the orange dots here are when we sampled AOP data at Niwot Ridge. I just kind of penciled in some of the older data. And then this is a coarse plot generated in Google Earth Engine that shows the NDVI changing seasonally over the years using Landsat 8 data. And so you can, where we sample only at peak greenness, it's kind of just like a snapshot in time, but you could tie that together with this longer term signal from Landsat 8 to generate a fuller, more complete picture here. And then EMIT hasn't been collecting data super long. I think it just started in 2022. But this is an example of the EMIT images over the Niwot Ridge site. There's about 15 since September 2022. Some of these are cloud covered or incomplete, and so it may not be a complete data set, but we're getting more images than we are just with the NEON data. So the point there was just to show how you can fill in that temporal resolution. Okay, and then I also just wanted to highlight an example of a scaling research or scalable research that can be done with NEON data. That LiDAR data set is really something that not a lot of other space-based sensors collect. We have JEDI, but that's again at a really coarse scale. So this study was actually carried out by Meta and the World Research Institute, and it's using the AOP canopy height model data to make global maps of canopy height. And so they pulled in optical satellite data, trained it on the canopy height models, and then we're able to create this kind of global scale map. And there's a blog about it and it's an open paper in GitHub repo. So kind of an interesting use case and really what NEON was designed to enable. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight how you can access the AOP data, and then hopefully we'll get into a couple short demos. So AOP data is available through the NEON data portal, as well as an API, so you can programmatically download data using R or Python. We're creating a Python package to do this, and there's already a nice R package to do this. And then we're also adding AOP data to Google Earth Engine to enable this sort of scalable analysis. We have a subset of data available now, and then we'll add more upon request. So if anyone's interested in any specific sites, you can reach out to us and we'll add that for you. And we are planning on adding the full archive. It will just take some time. And then we pretty soon, hopefully in the next couple of months, you'll be able to just search and find the NEON data on the GEE data catalog. We have a lot of resources for getting started with the NEON data and AOP data. We have a learning hub linked here. I think these slides will be shared. And then, as I mentioned, there's some exploratory notebooks on linking NEON and AOP data to EMIT. They're kind of just starter scripts. And then we have some Google Earth Engine scripts and apps for you to play around with if you're interested in. And this is just more for reference, but this is where to find our data on Google Earth Engine. Okay, so it's a bit of a whirlwind, but in summary, it's a really exciting time to tackle these kind of global ecological research questions with all of the data that's available and becoming available in the next 5-10 years. Data are rapidly improving in resolution, from multispectral to hyperspectral and from regional to global. And then NEON is really designed to be this bridge to satellite data with everything from ground-based collections that can be used to model data at a larger spatial scale. And then lastly, I just want to point out that tying in local understanding of sites is super important. Like I mentioned in the beginning, that satellite data is not truth. It's really just kind of a proxy or model to understand what's going on. And so understanding your local site and the local data is a key piece of these kind of analyses. I think I'll open it to question and then yeah, we can look at some data in person. Any? Okay, I have a few comments from the chat. So someone says NASA has presently pushed back SBG launches for VSWR in 2032 and thermal and infrared in 2028. So a little bit later. Is there a link to the notebook you can share? Yes. Oh, someone posted the vitals.
You're saying so we can share.
Yeah, let's see. Why, okay, I kind of glossed over this. One of the questions is why were the L3 vegetation traits products recalled. So we had a few hyperspectral derived products were suspended because the models we used were not well validated or accurate. And so those are currently in development, things like foliar nitrogen and things like that. And so we expect to have new products built from actual machine learning models using ground-based data available in the next year or two, hopefully.
So great talk, Bridget. I was just wondering, so this notion of taking the neon footprints and being able to scale them up and essentially fill in the gaps with like NASA data is really compelling. And one thing I oftentimes wonder and would just like to have your thoughts on is, you know, what are kind of what's the potential and also the caveats to that in terms of representativeness of neon sites of the actual domains?
Yeah.
And do you have any thoughts about how, you know, if there are potential challenges, how the community might like rally to fill any gaps?
Yeah, that's a great question. You think about this. So I think the biggest challenge here in doing that scaling is the fact that AOP data really provides just a snapshot at one point in time, once a year, once every couple of years, really. And so making extrapolations based off of that one snapshot in time is like it should be done with care. And so Sydney asked about how representative the neon sites were. Neon sites were selected to be representative of a whole ecological domain, we call it. So it's like a region that has similar parameters. But of course, there were other factors that played, like logistically, where we could do that sampling. And so I think the question is like, are those actually representative of the domain? And I think that requires further analysis. Like you actually have to go in and look at the data. There is a paper in the works on this, like how representative is AOP data and can we use it to extrapolate to this whole larger area? So I think that's an active research question, but it's not, again, yeah, everything should be used with care and not just like, okay, yeah, this is representative, so we can use this one data set, scale it up to satellite data, and then we're good. But yeah, it's something that I think is still actively being studied.
Thank you.
About the EMIT data set, like how they monitor the dust. Is it monitor dust in the air or the?
Oh yeah, the EMIT. Yeah, so EMIT is designed similar to the AOP sensors. It's a passive sensor that's collecting information on the ground. If there was some sort of dust plume during the collection, you would see that as well. But my understanding is it's more designed to understand surface processes on the ground. Yeah. Okay, we have a few more online questions. The hyperspectral data is only available for some neon sites. Is that because data were not collected or some sites or just data processing delay? Okay, so I'm not sure what years of data you're asking about, but we have had a processing delay with the 2022 and 2023 data. We were developing this new BRDF for bidirectional reflectance correction, and that took some time. And so we are generating those data products now, and they should be available in the next several months. Do the neon sites try to follow the forest inventory analysis plots? Are they separate and any overlap is coincidental? Yeah, so great question. And I actually don't know a ton about this, but they are separate. Some of our sites do, like our AOP data are over forest inventory analysis sites, like Wind River. I'm sure there's some other examples. We have actually tried to initially explore pairing those data. It's been a little bit hard to get a hold of some of the FIA data. Sometimes because those species are protected and they don't actually give the exact locations and things like that.
So you have this like amazing view of the data that's coming from NEON. Like from your perspective, are there questions? Like, oh, wow, somebody should really ask this with the data now. And then like in the future, like, oh, it's gonna be so great when we have this cross-site comparison, and I would love to see somebody ask this question. Like, are there,
Right.
do you have a laundry list of? And also kind of a footnote here too, that given that the macrophenology working group is here, like anything with phenology. And also I just wanted to say hi, I'm Jennifer Balch, I'm the director of EASL, and we're so excited that you all are here, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, great question. I might pull from some of my colleagues who are here as well. But in terms of, I think that like one of the biggest things right now is not necessarily a research question that I'm thinking of, but I'm thinking like AOP data is really well suited to develop algorithms that could then be used for SBG. So it's going to be a massive data set coming out at a huge scale. And so we can use the data, both AOP and EMIT right now, to kind of start creating these scaling algorithms. And then when SBG comes online, hopefully people will be ready. And part of that is just the compute required is so intensive. And I think you all know this. That's why EASL and Cyverse is partly here to help us learn how to do things in the cloud. And yeah, these, I think, data sets are great precursors to that. I'll have to think more about actual research because I personally don't have a laundry list immediately. I don't know if Katie or Eric have any things you guys are thinking of.
I think it's cool how we have these like high quality reference points for doing spatial interpolation, satellite data. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited about that. And then also as an ecologist, I'm interested in having this potential of this really cool coverage from the satellite data to measure change in time, stability of the communities.
Yep.
Sorry. With the chronology group, so I have kind of like a chronology question.
Okay.
And so satellite images are like really coarse resolution, but is there a way we can get use by the scale resolution if we can have that level between that's just like lowering so satellite we can do great, you know,
Right.
but I don't know, using some of like those spectral things you have, is there like a potential to validate like flower?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Just other like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. The AOP data is a little bit limited in capturing seasonality because we do just try to capture peak greenness. So when the leaves are most photosynthetically active. We do also have a phenology data set. So we have cameras pointing at the ground. And so that could be a data set to tie in. I'm not sure how much the group has covered this, and it's also not my specialty, but yeah, I think combining these is really useful, and then potentially tying in other data sets as well to look at that seasonality. I know Avarice or NASA has done some experiments kind of more focused on that, like the Green Up in Santa Barbara using similar sensors. And so tying in these other projects could potentially be an avenue.
I want to talk about the cams.
Oh,
I gotcha.
Oh, they
People are asking in the chat to recap me of opening highlights. Questions. They don't want to put it.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Into this.
Yeah. This last question was asking about phenology changes and how you could use remote sensing data to capture those like flowering or certain events like that.
And also, you can say something. I'd love to.
I think it's already moved on.
Oh.
I was just talking, gonna think about the high resolution data from AOP as like time points for detecting trends, like you know, the leading edge of beetle kill. and disease prevalence. Since we don't have the phenology, like over, like time series over a year, we do have those really high resolution points from year to year, which leads to a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah.
But that is.
Yeah.
And I can talk more. That's good.
Yeah, so Katie Jones, just for those online, was saying that those AOP data can really be thought of like, I think, as a snapshots and help detect leading edge of events like beetle kill, things like that. There's a question about BRDF correction. Let me just read it. Oh, okay. So this question is about whether there's metadata in the hyperspectral data to look at things like phase angles in the neon HDF5 file. So the neon reflectance data are provided in the HDF5 hierarchical data format. It's an open format. It's a little bit custom, but it's kind of like a file folder structure. And within that, there is a lot of metadata information. I can actually just demo that real quick in Google Earth Engine because we've tied in a lot of that. And that does include things like 2-sensor zenith and azimuth. And so that's kind of one of the benefits of having this open format is you can include all of this information about not only the data, but how it was processed. Yeah, I'll just switch real quick to the Google Earth Engine because people can be exploring this on their own too. So in the bottom of this slide, there's a link to an app that you can look at the spectra of data over the 9-watt ridge site, and then also a GitHub repo that you can just pull into Earth Engine and play around with the scripts on your own. So I'll just show some of those. Share different. Okay, yeah, so this is some of our data in Earth Engine. Just to show you some of the, I can click on the right thing. So if you're looking for metadata in Earth Engine, it would be located here in H5. It's a little bit a different way of viewing it, but we have all of the bands and then properties associated with each of the bands. If you scroll down, we actually have, oops, got lost. Too many windows here. We have a lot of those metadata bands. So, oops. I think I printed out one without the metadata, but yeah, it would be in this bands here, and then it tells you what those like the azimuth and zenith angles and things like that.
Does the Google Earth Engine, when it rolls out, will it have, where can people find the release version?
Yeah, so that will be, not sure if I have it in this one, but it will be one of the properties. So we will have,
Does everybody know what release version?
yeah, this is a good point that I glossed over.
So every year,
Go ahead.
So every year Neon, when they kind of have a timestamp on the data where they've kind of done all the QA QC for that version of the data. And so if you're working on Neon data, it's really nice to use that release version because it makes your analysis more reproducible because someone can go and find like the exact QA QC version and everything like that. It's important to cite that when you publish your data sets so that it can.
Yeah, so great point. And we always ask that people pay attention to that because we do apply corrections to our data or fix issues that we see and then try to capture that all and only release valid data as much as we can. And so that release information will be contained in this properties. We'll have something that says released or provisional to state whether it's provisional data. That means it should be used kind of with caution, and then the release year as well.
I have been working with the BRDF correction for Neon, and I don't remember having like as multi, but I remember having like a log file with the time of collection and also the illumination factor already stored as pixel, like as a grid thing. So
Yeah.
you can perform BRDF correction.
Yeah,
with
that's
the factors of
yeah, great point. So with our new BRDF corrected data, we'll include the parameters that were used in that BRDF correction. And then also we are producing the at sensor radiance data as well as the uncorrected reflectance data. So if you wanted to apply your own BRDF correction, you could. And we use an open source package called High Tools to do that correction that was developed by I think the Phil Townsend's lab. Yeah. Any other questions? Like we have some of their answers in the chat. Yeah, well, and I guess lastly, I just want to say, please reach out to us if you're interested in using AOP data or kind of building off any of the initial repositories we've started. We're always excited to, yeah, have the community involved and help share those open resources.